For our preliminary task, we were given the brief of composing a short video that included continuity editing, 180-degree rule, 2 lines of dialogue, and the opening of a door. We also had to explore with using different camera techniques. In our preliminary task and our Wilderness Woods task, we experimented with using Handycam with a recording video overlay to convey the idea that the footage is being recorded by the character live.
We then found that this technique of using Handycam and the overlay in post-production was effective in creating a relationship between the audience and the character that is filming the situation. Therefore, as a group, we decided to maintain this aspect in our final piece by having a lot of shots Handycam, so a relationship between the teenage character and the audience was created.
However, when we filmed our preliminary task and the Wilderness Woods task, both of them were shot outside. This meant that when we recorded our final piece, we had not experimented with recording in an inside location. This created a problem because we decided to record our piece in dark lighting. Therefore, we went out to film a rough cut of our final piece using the same cameras as our other tasks.
When looking back on this rough cut, we discovered that filming in low-key lighting would be a problem for us if we used these cameras. Therefore, to overcome these problems, we decided we would use a better camera to improve the on-screen quality of our piece. We borrowed another class member's DSLR, a Canon 600D, and this significantly improved the technique of using low-key lighting in our piece.
In our preliminary task and Wilderness Woods task, we didn't consider titles very much. However, in our final piece, this was a vital aspect to ensure that our piece was similar to a realistic film opening. Through the program Adobe After Effects, we created titles that were more professional and conventional to the horror genre. 2 different animations were created that were taken into consideration. The first one was more technical and required a greater level of editing ability, but after a lot of discussion, we decided against using it. This is because it looked slightly too animated and not conventional of the supernatural horror genre. We therefore chose to use a second title sequence that was created as it was more serious and simplistic and represented the horror genre in a more appropriate manner. This was especially as the branches over the text in this design related to the mise-en-scène in our opening.
We experimented with a variety of costumes throughout all the tasks. In the first few tasks, costume wasn't thought of in great detail. We wore our school suits throughout our first preliminary tasks, as we shot it within school hours on site. When we then went to complete our Wilderness Woods task, costume was thought about in a bit more detail. We were in own clothes and this helped to create realism in the piece. Nevertheless, we didn't concentrate on costume that much as we were more focused on practicing certain types of shots. When we finally got to shoot our final piece, costume was thought in much greater detail. We got the antagonist to wear a long black t-shirt, almost looking like a robe. We wanted the protagonist to be portrayed as normal teenage kids, but therefore got them to wear quite normal clothes. Due to the weather conditions, they wore coats. Props were used more in some tasks than others. In our first preliminary task, we didn't use any specific props. This was due to completing the task at school. Nevertheless, when we undertook the Wilderness Woods task, props were thought about in much greater detail. We used a bag, water bottle, and a phone. We used these props to help create realism throughout this piece. We liked the idea of filming on a phone using Handycam, and thus, when filming our real production, we used this feature. We also decided to use a baby doll wrapped in a blanket to portray the baby, Betsy. Other props such as dust sheets and sticks were used to create realism, as we wanted to create the feel of an abandoned house.
For our preliminary task, little planning was done, as we had to stick to a brief of a limited location. We sat down for an hour and planned our storyline, and then some of the shots we wanted to include. For the Wilderness Woods task, we filled out a risk assessment and call sheet, and talked as a group about some of the shots we wanted to include, and planned a rough order and storyline based on our unseen location. On arriving at the site, we surveyed our ideas and walked through our plan to ensure it would work.
For our final task, we spent a lot more time on planning. We completed lots of background research before we had a concrete idea for our horror opening. This helped us to ensure we wanted to go into the subgenre of supernatural horror. We then completed analyses of films within our subgenre, including a technical analysis each, a shot-by-shot breakdown. We further on did an animatic, a rough cut, and several location recce's to ensure that we were prepared for the final shoot.
For sound in our preliminary task, we used diegetic sound from the camera's microphone that we cross-faded between shots as to achieve continuity of sound due to different sound levels of wind and passing traffic. This is something that became more of a problem in the Wilderness Woods task, as the wind was a lot stronger, so we used the same technique to overcome this. In our final task, we planned to be inside for the majority of the sequence. One reason for this that it would be a lot easier to achieve continuity of sound. One of the problems we faced on our shoot was the weather. This was out of our control, so we had to make sure that we took the right precautions to take care of the equipment. For our preliminary and Wilderness Woods tasks, we were lucky with the weather being clear and no chance of rain. However, when it came to our final task, it was raining lightly when we needed to shoot our outside shots. To overcome this, we covered the camera with a plastic bag and held an umbrella over the cameraman at all times to keep our equipment safe. In evaluation, for all our tasks, we believe that sound is one of the strongest aspects, especially in our final task, as we put a lot of thought into the sound mix. We also believe that our earlier tasks have a good narrative for the limited conditions and restrictions we had on them. One thing we feel we could have done better for the final product is use an older, more abandoned looking house. However, this was not possible with our logistics. We didn't have a high budget to decorate the set, and we could only use locations where we could get permission, like Will's house.